Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to the High North Dialogue 2021, live from Stormen Library, right here at the center of the city of Bude, surrounded by tons of books and a lot of knowledge. Great to have you here with us again. My name is still Andreas Raspotnik. I'm still your host and the High North Dialogue very own brand recognition. Yesterday, we learned about Norwegian strategies for Arctic development. Today, we will put these strategies into a local and global perspective, discuss the potential for coexistence of ocean industries, contemplate over the very meaning of living in the Arctic and how to win the title in the Norwegian Football League, learn more about hydrogen, and choose our High North Young Entrepreneur. Today will be about Norway in the High North. However, before we start, 3 points to remember. First, remember to spread the Arctic word, the High North Dialogue word. Please do tweet, share, and like. And of course, remember to always use hashtag HND21. And of course, but only if you want, hashtag we love the host. Second, the conference is about you participating also. So please remember to ask your question right in the chat function of our main stage. All the questions you ask will be collected and then forwarded to our respective moderators. And third, and very importantly, the High North Young Entrepreneur Award. As already emphasized yesterday, you as the audience can select and choose the High North Young Entrepreneur. In order to do so, check out our nominees, their videos, and vote. Everything can be found online under the Expo option. Voting is still possible until today, 2:30 p.m. Central European Time, so you still have about 4.5 hours to do so. Don't forget about that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready for day 2 of the High North Dialogue 2021. To guide us through our very first session of today, please welcome the Vice Dean of Education of Norway University Business School, June Borge Doornich. However, before we digitally meet June, listen to her in the following video highlighting Norway University's Global Management Master Program and the advantages of studying and living in Bude. Film up.
Tror du at verdensproblemer kan løses fra der du I dag? Har du interesse for smart og ansvarlig ledelse, bærekraftig innovasjon og energi? Har du lyst til å studere I Bodø, men samtidig oppleve verden? Kanskje vil du ha hele verden som ditt arbeidssted I fremtiden? Da tror vi at en master I global ledelse noe for deg. Vi kan garantere deg en spennende og relevant utdanning for fremtiden. Og du, hele verden, den venter på deg.
Welcome to Bude, a small city that is located just north of the Arctic Circle. It is a city where the long winter months of darkness is a scenery for the beautiful polar nights with an endless variation of playful lights. The city is therefore known as Bude by light. It is a city where the long, endless summer months of total brightness is a scenery for the clear blue sky and the sea. That brings out the joyful people in the endless nights. And the city is therefore also known as Bude by night. Besides the beautiful nature that surrounds the city as an artwork, it holds excellent knowledge and expertise about Arctic issues and phenomena. Bude might not be as big as the metropolitan cities Shanghai and Moscow, but our Arctic location and the expertise that we hold brings us partners from all around the globe, including also Russia and China as the major players in the Arctic. In this session, we will take a deep dive into an educational partnership that stands out. And it stands out because of its Arctic focus. It's an Arctic context that the program is founded on. And it is also an interdisciplinary program where the students learn different academic fields. We will learn how 3 leading universities from 3 countries have come together to develop a partnership to build and to disseminate knowledge about the Arctic. And that's not only for the youths that is participating on the study program, but also for experienced Arctic stakeholders that are also participating on the conference here today. Already in 2005, the first students were admitted at a program that we then called Energy Management. The program, it was built and offered by Nord University and MGIMO in Moscow. And it was the High North Center at the business school and the Moscow State Institute of International Relations that was in the driving seat of this joint master program. And a part of that study program was the High North Dialogue Conference. So already then, we actually took the students on the coastal steamer sailing from Bodø up to Kirkenes. The students met and they learned from experienced leaders in Arctic business and politics. But the curiosity arose around the conference. So it engaged more and more participants, not only from students from other places in the world, but also from leading businesses and politicians that have a focus on the Arctic. So the conference, it grew so large that we had to move on land, safe land, here in Bodø. And in 2015, we entered a new partnership with East China Normal University in Shanghai, with the School of Advanced International Relations and Area Studies as the main partner. We started to make changes on the already well-established and also well-known energy management by integrating a third partner with ECNU. We changed the content of the program. We moved away from the hardcore energy and petroleum focus to have a broader focus, including both renewable resources and circular economics. The students also learn about responsible leadership, about entrepreneurship, and about smart cities. So the main focuses that should be placed on the Arctic context. So we gave the program a new profile and a new name, and today this is the program Global Management. The students that are admitted to this program, they have a unique opportunity where they can study in 3 cities. They can study here in Bodø, in Moscow, and in Shanghai. And I don't think anyone else have created such a unique program, so we should be proud of it. In this session, we will learn more about the experiences in developing this common master program and the outputs for the students and for the universities, but also for the countries and the Arctic stakeholder community as a whole. I have with me friends from the Arctic, friends from the universities that we have cooperated with, and I will introduce them along the way. But I'm going to start with the dean at the business school, Gry Alsos, who is with me here today at the stage. And Gry, why is this cooperation so important? Why do we place an effort on cooperating with Russian and Chinese universities? What is the output?
I think I'll start a little bit broadly. Norway is a small and open economy. We are dependent on and benefit enormously from good international relationships. And particularly so here in the north, where our industries are very international, and we have traditions from hundreds, for not to say 1,000 years back, of international trade in the north. We therefore need people with international knowledge and skills, with international understanding of other cultures, and also with relationships and friendships across borders. And that is what we are able to provide our students in collaboration with MGIMO University and ECNU. So that's the broad picture of why this is so important for us.
Mm. Yesterday we heard the Prime Minister Erna Solberg talking about entrepreneurship in the Arctic context. And we also have put a focus on entrepreneurship in this program. Why do you think that is important for developing the Arctic?
Entrepreneurial skills and mindsets that she talked about yesterday is important both within industry to start new businesses, but also to transform public sector and societies. We need people that can take action and turn a crisis into opportunities. And for this, I also think broad knowledge, inputs from other areas, interdisciplinary knowledge and knowledge about different cultures is important to spur entrepreneurship.
Yeah, thank you, Gry. Director Sergey Vasiliev. Vasiliev, he's the director of MGIMO Odintsovo campus in Moscow. And you have been a part of this cooperation for many, many years. What do you see as the main value of this cooperation between the countries?
Yes, first of all, I would like to correct you calling me director of the Odintsovo. I used to be director for 4 years, and now I'm the main building of MGIMO. So this is just for correction. Of course, we have been engaged in a very close cooperation since 2005. So I've been enjoying this cooperation. And actually, what I would say about this cooperation, Arctic used to be a zone of confrontation in the time of the Cold War. But nowadays, it is an area of exemplary close international, mostly bilateral cooperation. So we reap all sorts of dividends of our cooperation with Norway, specifically in the area of education.
Thank you, Director Vasiliev. ECNU, the Director of School of Advanced International and Area Studies, Sang Shin, you stepped into this partnership in 2015, and I don't know how many meetings we have participated to put on this program and to ensure that it has been successful. What do you see as the main value for participating in this program?
First of all, I think the main value is to contribute to a joint initiative between the Chinese states and increasingly more and more Chinese research educational institutions that's related directly to the Arctic. Some of you might know the Chinese state released an important white paper on its Arctic policy in 2018. One of its first of the, which shows a very strong interest in learning more about the Arctic as part of its overall global development. Right? So we need people, particularly young people, who will have the basic understanding of that particular region in the world from the Chinese perspective. And that, in that regard, universities, research institutes are going to play a very important role. So I think that's the first major value. The second, the major value is through the joint program with our Norwegian and Russian colleagues. We led the students to have a direct exposure to a region and to a set of issues that are important that has not been well explored in the Chinese context, like the issues the first speaker mentioned, smart cities, sustainable development, renewable energy, etc. In that regard, our Norwegian partners, our colleagues, have much more experience and have a long history in developing these policy areas. And I think that's an additional value to let the Chinese students to have a direct exposure to these policy issues of such importance in the long run for not only for Norway, for Russia, but for China too.
Yesterday, we heard about a student from ECNU that is studying here this semester. And she told us that one of the beautiful things of staying in Bodø is the nature and the people that she encountered, because it's so different from living and staying in Shanghai. And last autumn, we had the first large group of students from ECNU here in Bodø. And the plan was for them to go to Moscow in the fall. But because of the pandemic, they had to stay in Bodø for a year. Can you say something, Shang, about what is the experiences by the students? What was their feedback of staying in Bodø for a year?
For them, it's of course, for all the 11 students who stay in Bodø last year, it was an eye-opening experience. Like you just mentioned, Bodø as a city and Shanghai are two cities on a two completely different scale in terms of the size, in terms of population density, in terms of set of other basic things they experience on a daily basis, right? How to even use your mobile phone to buy grocery. It's a quite different experience in these two different locations. And besides that, to see Northern Lights for the first time in their life was also quite eye-opening experience. But more important than that is something I just mentioned is the 1 year stay in Buda in Norway really opened their eyes to a set of crucial issues of global importance, including importance related to China, which are not well covered in our curriculum, are not well covered in their daily experience in Shanghai, in China. And that's going to be of immense importance in the long run for their academic development, for their career development, and potentially may be related to the establishment of certain expertise in these policy areas for China in general, right? One of the 11 students who stay in Buda last year are now doing an internship, largely because her experience in Norway, her exposure to issues related to renewable energy. And she told me she was not expecting that. She didn't have much prior exposure to these topics. So the company that become interested in her in the internship, become interested in her mostly because of her experience in Norway. So that's just one of many examples of how 1 year experience in the program in Buda in Norway have provided unexpected new opportunity potentials for these students.
Thank you. Lawrence Smith, you are a professor at Brown University, where you have a particular focus on environmental studies and the Arctic context. And when you listen to these representatives from the three universities, they bring sort of the local perspective of why it is important for the universities and why it is important for the students. But if you bring this up on a global perspective, how can this benefit Arctic development? How can this benefit for the Arctic stakeholder communities that we actually have brought together three universities that bring knowledge to the youths?
Yeah, well, thank you. This is a great question, and I agree with everything that's been said. And they're actually quite interrelated. The Arctic region as a whole is one of the most poorly misunderstood places on Earth. And not to this audience, of course, but to the much vaster global audience outside of this forum. It's a impenetrable place that's thought of as an empty resource frontier, ripe for the taking. It's imagined as a theater of conflict and militarization. Yet I think most of us here today know that this is not the way the place is at all. It's a place of cooperation. It's a place of more agreement than disagreement. It's also a place that is under-resourced, both in people, economic resources, and in people. And this is why the local activities and efforts that we're talking about are so important, because they bear outsized value to the world as a whole. I'll just use one example here at Nord University, this long-running program, which has this wonderful record and history of bringing over so many students from Russia to study here in Buda. That type of interaction is very badly needed, even for those people who will not necessarily remain living in the north, but go back to Moscow and have a deeper understanding of this, to go back to Shanghai, to educate their colleagues in Shanghai about the realities of the situation here. This is incredibly important from a global perspective, and it's why these efforts in the north are so badly needed. And frankly, the alumni of these programs carry outsized importance and value, not just for education, but also track 3 diplomacy through back channels and so forth, just because we have a population of people who know the place, who are living abroad.
Lawrence, you are situated in the US. You work in the US. Or right now you are in Finland. So somehow you are an outsider from this cooperation. How do you see the value for the future of the business and the governance in the Arctic with these students that sort of develop this new knowledge? How can we excel on the knowledge of these young students for the future?
Well, it's important both locally and globally. At the local level, we heard yesterday from labor leader Jonas Gahr Støre and the Prime Minister about the need the need for skilled labor and people in the north, and the imperative for increased funding to universities in the north. I mean, Norway has 2 fine universities at Bodø and Tromsø. Sweden has Luleå. There's Rovaniemi. There are Arkhangelsk, There are a number of wonderful universities in the north that require greater support. But the value globally, as I was saying earlier, is the diaspora, not only from those places, but also within other universities in the south that have student bodies that are more and more interested in the Arctic. I've been studying and visiting the Arctic for 29 years, and I can tell you, and I've been working in southern universities at University of California, Los Angeles, now Brown University, places far from the Arctic. But I can tell you, I have never seen so much interest from people who have never been here than I am seeing now. And so the opportunities for people from outside the region to want to learn about the place and be captured by it, captivated by it, and continue to work on Arctic issues, even if they don't live there or move there, is still now greater than ever. I mean, my own students who I brought to the Arctic, they fell in love with the place, they made it their life's passion. They are now spreading that same word to their own students at Hong Kong University, at Nanjing University in China, at the University of North Carolina in the U.S., at the University of California, Santa Barbara in the U.S. They, too, and their students are talking about Arctic issues and raising awareness and sensitivity and an appreciation of the importance and opportunities of this remarkable place. So it's intertwined. I think it's somewhat artificial to just say it's a local problem. What about the global impacts? There's a lot of mixing going on between both spheres, and I've never seen it before until about the last 10 years or so. It's very exciting.
I think it's important also that you address that it's you have to stay in the region to understand what is this region about. And also sort of to develop the passion, you have to be in this region to see it and to experience it. I'm going to bring in a question from the audiences of the conference. So I'm going to give the word to Hogne.
Thank you. We have a question from, several questions actually, from the audience that are online. A question for the whole panel. Are there any joint business opportunities in the Arctic where the US, China, Norway and Russia could all work together?
Thank you. I'm going to bring first Gry on the floor.
Thank you. That's a good question and an ambitious question, and I think the answer is obviously yes, but it's more difficult to be very specific about what these business opportunities are. But there are both opportunities related to natural resources, to collaboration between cultures, and there are a lot of business opportunities also in creating a more sustainable world, which requires collaboration between the whole globe, so to say, in the north. Without being very specific about, we need entrepreneurs to identify the specific opportunities. These are very resource-rich regions, which needs, as we have heard, skilled people to develop the opportunities.
Yesterday, also, the student again addressed the importance of business collaboration between Norway and China. And Xin Shang, do you have any reflection on that question?
Oh, yeah. China, if we're talking about China as a country, as an actor, obviously is a very latecomer to the Arctic. And overall, I think it's fair to say both the the state and the business and all kinds of social institutions are just beginning to learn about this region. It's at a very early stage. But in terms of collaboration, as one of the speakers just mentioned, one way to look at the Arctic is a resource extraction. And a stereotypical image about China is going out to try to extract resources all around the world to feed it this big, gigantic production machine back home. I think that's probably part of the story. The Arctic become attractive to Chinese business. Part of the attraction comes from its resourcefulness. But I think there's other aspects which become actually increasingly more important, where we can see the potential of collaboration. One of the field is to learn and exchange experience of building more sustainable cities. That's one thing I was impressed by how much people actually devoted to the idea of a smart city or smart city governance in a relatively small city like Buda, while similar ideas have been circulating and has been practiced on a slightly different scale in many cities in China too. I think this kinds of joint sharing experience, lessons, and mutually supporting experiments on developing projects related to smart cities or renewable resources development actually are also a very helpful and a valuable platform for potential not only bilateral, even multilateral collaborations between business, public administration institutions, and the research and education institution. Here, I think China, Russia, Norway, US, maybe many other international actors all have joint interest and potential value to seek collaborations.
Thank you. Director Vasiliev, you have raised your hand, so do you have a reflection on that question?
Yes, this actually is a very good question, and I would like to answer it from the Russian perspective. So we all know that Russia is a great Arctic state with the largest exclusive economic zone in the Arctic Ocean. And as I said before, the Arctic used to be a zone of confrontation in the times of the Cold War, but now it is an area of exemplary, close international and mostly bilateral cooperation. So Russia also is very active in the Arctic Council, and all of those things are prerequisites for good cooperation with other nations and in other projects. So as we know, Arctic contains about 25% of the remaining undiscovered hydrocarbons, and Russian oil and gas majors are key players in this area. And also, 500,000 of Russian citizens live and work in the Arctic, beyond the Arctic Circle, and 300,000 people live in Norilsk alone. Also, 26 small-numbered indigenous peoples, citizens of the Russian Federation, also live and work in the Russian Arctic. So we are, therefore, vitally interested in protecting the ecosystem of the Arctic, its wildlife heritage, unique environment, and must develop non-renewable resources such as hydrocarbons and rare earth metals on the principles of sustainable development. And we must also observe the principles of co-management with regards to exploitation of renewable and non-renewable resources of the Arctic. So Northern Sea Route also was created in the 1930s by former Soviet Union, and its importance is growing every year. So based on all this, I should say that therefore politicians, businessmen, or public service officers can't get around without good and comprehensive knowledge of all facets of the Arctic. So MGIMO University trains diplomats, economists, politicians, managers, journalists, and for them, all disciplines, directly or indirectly touching upon the Arctic, are a must. And so speaking specifically about the cooperation in the Arctic, and this is very important, we should say here a couple of words about the cooperation between specifically Russia and Norway, Rosneft and Equinor, so and also Gazprom. So just this huge project of Stockman, which is a twin of the Norwegian Snow White, though it was not a big success, and this project is on shelf now and postponed. But actually, this is a good example, good graphic example of how big oil and gas companies could cooperate based on all the principles of sustainable development and mutual benefit and so on and so on. Also, another graphic example of our cooperation in business is the formerly disputed area in the Barents Sea and the decision for the joint development of transboundary resources there, and an agreement which was signed in 2010 between Russia and Norway. So the question about business cooperation and cooperation in the educational area and other areas between countries in the Arctic are of key importance. And actually, when we educate our young people, our students, we would like to instill in their heads not only the sort of disciplines of our education, but also great respect to the Arctic and its role, which it will play in the future of mankind, and it has already played in the history of mankind. So actually, this question, which was posed by a student, is of big sort of meaning, and there are a variety of good answers to this question. So this is a very broad question. And of course, I don't have time to fully answer it, but I try to do my best to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Vasiliev.
May I add just one more example of these broad areas of cooperation?
Go on, Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, another one, which is quite non-controversial, is just the need and the opportunity for global cooperation on information technology in the Arctic. I mean, regardless of how you feel about oil and gas development or wildlife preserves, regardless of what the particular economic sector is, all of them are suffering from a lack of basic scientific information, charting, mapping, remote sensing, bandwidth, and there are tremendous opportunities to collaborate in these information technologies, and these are not controversial. I mean, I myself have many projects with researchers in China developing new advanced remote sensing methods, because the Arctic being near the pole where the satellite orbits converge very closely, the density of imaging is much higher than the rest of the Earth, yet it's also one of the most remote and least accessible places on Earth. So we have this convergence and least understood. So we have this real opportunity to cooperate in these other areas as well. And a number of studies have shown that the single biggest obstacle to the proliferation of a number of different kinds of businesses and entrepreneurial activities in the Arctic is the lack of internet bandwidth. And I think that's something that all sectors can agree is needed in this region, and there are many ways for international partners to work together on these issues.
Yeah, thank you on the reflections. It seems that we have interdisciplinary challenges in the Arctic, and the program that actually are interdisciplinary, quite important to tackle all the challenges that we can see. I'm going to bring the word again to Hogne, who have a question from the audience.
Yeah, there are actually quite a few questions. So another one here is coming from Shanghai, actually. It's a question for the panel. Considering the geopolitical tensions rising in the Arctic region, will business cooperation be interrupted by these tensions? And how will the Arctic nations work together to restrain conflicts and disagreements?
Xin Zhang, would you like to address the question first?
Yeah, I think it's a timely question, because we see in certain mass media circles and policy circles, the Arctic seems to become a new epicenter of geopolitical confrontation. And if that kind of competition becomes the dominant theme for the Arctic region, unfortunately, the kind of potential business collaboration can reap from international cooperation is going to be exhausted very soon. But I think the positive side of the reality is, for me, I'm not an expert on this particular region, but just judging by what I understand, the recent escalation of some of the military and intelligence technology in this region really hasn't reached such a full-scale confrontation yet. Far from that. That's one. Secondly, for example, for potential newcomer like China in this region, overall, it's as I briefly mentioned, I think it has shown great interest, but in a very reserved manner, as a very reserved manner. It didn't even propose straightforward, too ambitious sort of business or political projects to directly tackle resources in a traditional manner in this region. I think the experts community and the policy community, for example, in China, have, I think, quite clear realization this is a very special region, and we should show respect in the first place before any discussion of exploration or development of the region. That's one, I think, very positive sign. And secondly, as I briefly mentioned, is there's another, I would say, global trend that to see the preservation of the region as at least part of the major goal of approaching this region. Some of you might know the Chinese state just not long ago issued a policy goal to reach carbon neutrality by 2060. That's quite an ambitious goal. But if this goal is to be materialized or realized by time, the domestic energy consumption and overall energy policies need to really be upgraded in a much modern and environmental friendly manner. And in regard of that, I think a lot of the experts and institutions in China are looking for all the Arctic nations for practices, policy practices, experience that has been turned out to be more advanced along the energy neutrality, carbon neutrality, far more advanced than China. So that's, I think, also a very positive sign to reduce the potential tension from geopolitical confrontation, but look for policy areas, policy practices that are going to work for joint interest for all these Arctic nations, not only Arctic nations, even beyond that, for the common humanities as a whole.
Yeah. Gry, do you have some reflection from a Norwegian perspective?
Yes, I also think this is a very timely question, and I was on a panel a few days ago with businesses and venture capital investors here in Norway, talking about the influence of the pandemic and what the future looked like in that respect. And one of the major concerns were the geopolitics turning potentially in a wrong direction, and perhaps also strengthened by the pandemic, because Norwegian businesses are so dependent on good international relations, not only from Norway to the other countries, but also between the big countries in the world. But that said, I also think that as a program like this, where we learn even more about the different culture, where the young people get friends and good relations and good understanding about what's happening in the different countries, is a very important way to try to deal with these bigger trends and relations, because in a situation where it's more tense between the superpowers, it's even more important to have good relationships to be able to continue collaboration in this area. And also, I mean, the challenges and also the opportunities that we have in the North is so dependent on the international collaboration for the challenges to be solved, whether it's related to climate issues or sustainability issues, or whether it's related to utilizing resources in a good way. So we need to, independent of what's happening on the global level, we need to continue the collaboration, I think.
Do you see any benefits for the companies that are situated in the Arctic when you look at the pandemic and how much the digitalization have evolved?
What we see is that during the pandemic, the distances have been reduced. Particularly for the businesses located in the periphery that have good digital skills and knowledge. And that is not because of their knowledge particularly, but it is because of the knowledge in the metropolitan cities on digitalization, because they are also forced to go on digital communication. At least some of the disadvantages of being in the periphery, I think, has been reduced, and hopefully some of these skills, these digitalization skills that we have all learned, will help us also in the future. But I also think that we can have collaboration, not being in the capital city, we can have collaborations a little bit, on the side, on the mainstream politics, and we can build relationships across borders directly in the north.
Thank you. I'm again going to bring in Hogne with a question from the audience.
Yeah, this time it's a question from the UK. A question for the entire panel. Universities and research are often internationally oriented, but are there some good examples of how Arctic universities and education contribute to the empowerment of local communities?
I'm going to give that question first to Director Vasiliev.
Well, it's a very good question, actually, but first I would like to say a couple of words about answering to the previous question. So it is unfortunate that elements of confrontation are returning to the Arctic, but confrontation is or used to be in the past. And for past 25 or 30 years, we have witnessed all the best fruits of cooperation and all the dividends of cooperation. And I believe that based on that, we won't let any further confrontation. We'll try not to do that, at least in our educational programs. And of course, in this case, I would like to stress the importance of the Arctic Council and its working group, because actually, as I said before, cooperation in the Arctic is based on bilateral agreements. And there is lack of international regulation, international pieces of legislation which could regulate relations in the Arctic. So there is only one piece of international law, that is United Nations Convention of the Sea of the Law. So therefore, the role of the Arctic Council in this case increases a lot, because actually oil and gas people, they are regulated, actually, oil and gas activities are regulated by the instructions which we received from the Arctic Council and its working group. Answering the question from UK, I would say that in this case, it would be good to say about the small numbered indigenous peoples of the Russian Federation. As you know, there are 26 of such peoples, and actually part of our curriculum is the issues of sustainable development vis-a-vis indigenous peoples in the Arctic and their traditional economy and their traditional land use and territories and so on, and how important this is for the survivability of indigenous peoples. And of course, based on that, as I said before, these principles of co-management between the oil and gas companies, which intrude actually into the traditional economies and life of indigenous peoples of the Arctic, and how they manage to compensate and to preclude any damage which could be inflicted on key and important things of the traditional economy of indigenous peoples. So therefore, our students, they do understand all the importance of all these issues, and actually in their work, when they work as managers, as directors in oil and gas and other resource companies, of course, they are guided by this knowledge. This is for sure. So this is just, there shouldn't be a simple answer to this question, but this is just a very, I tried to make a small contribution to answering this question.
Professor Smith, do you have a reflection on that topic?
Sure, yeah, I can think of a couple of examples of this, actually. most of from the North American and European perspective, most of the universities and colleges and learning centers within the high north itself tend to be under-resourced and understaffed, as I mentioned earlier. Obviously, these are critically important engines for local training and development of skills within the local population itself. But there are some good examples of ways to improve their capacity. One good example is the University of the Arctic. It's a consortium idea that brings together many of these learning centers and educational institutes and small colleges and larger universities to the south, brings them to, in fact, Nord University is a member of the University of the Arctic. It comprises many, many dozens of institutions around the world, not all of them in the Arctic. And that kind of, some of the relationships are stronger than others, but there's a platform there that enables sharing and distance learning and transfer of knowledge among these different institutions and from the larger universities, which are often in the south, northward. Another specific example I can give you from the point of the international scientific collaborations that you referred to is that in the United States, at least, the funding agencies now demand a certain amount of payback and interaction with local communities. That can be through capacity building with, local governmental agencies. It can be working with individuals directly. It can involve training. But this has been around for a while. It used to be more sort of talk. You'd write it into your proposals, but didn't have to perform. In the U.S., at least, that has really changed. You have to have a very detailed plan about how you're going to give back to the local community, and it has to be followed up upon, or you won't get another grant funded. So I think there are some good examples of these kinds of efforts that are taking place at this time.
Gry, you work with entrepreneurship. Do you have any good examples on that?
Not on community development based. I mean, in universities are tremendously important for community development. And I think also if you have a university in a community, you typically also can connect to the world in a better way. And also it means that you have students that graduate or other people in the community that also are connected to the world in a better way. So I think there are a lot of examples of how to, I mean, you can have the history of Nord University or the University of the Arctic and look at the development that has come from the establishment of these types of institutions in the north.
Thank you. So I'm going to bring in a final question from the audience. So Hogne, please.
Yes, we have talked a lot about opportunities, but what about challenges? For example, the new law on limiting international relations of universities and regulating educational activities in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Director Vasiliev, do you have a response to that question?
Yes, actually, this is the first time that I hear about this piece of legislation. We haven't yet suffered anything from that. So we, as we used to be free in doing business with other universities, we still are. So so far, I don't have any comment on that. And so this is the first time I actually hear about this.
I think we have a very good experience with cooperation with Russian universities, and not only in Moscow, but in the various regions in Russia. I would like to thank the panelists for participating in this session. Thank you for their reflections, and thank you for adding knowledge to this conference. Thank you for participating. Andreas.
Tusen tack, June, and thank you very much for excellently guiding us through that very first session. We'll take a little break now for about 20 minutes, and we'll be back at 11:10 Central European Time, sharp.